Hello everybody, Laszlo here. Welcome to the second video in the Block Breaker series. In this video, we'll be creating a new project, setting up the room, creating and naming our assets, and then that'll be it. So we're basically just getting the project ready to go. And then future videos will start coding and drawing and all those other things that we need to do. So let's get started. So I've launched GameMaker Studio 2. I hope you guys all have it installed and ready to go. We're going to make a brand new project, so let's click on new. We have two options. We have a choice between drag and drop project or a GameMaker language project. I personally am not a big fan of drag and drop. I never have been, because drag and drop is limited to kind of like the set of tools that it comes with. And if you want to do anything special or unique that's not in that set of tools, it's very hard to create that. And it's also very hard to teach through it because each block has to be like individually configured and stuff. It's a headache. So I'm going to use GameMaker language. It's very clean and you can use it's done using coding. So let's click that. This will bring up a file browser. I have a project. I have a lot of projects. I do have a folder for GameMaker Studio 2 games, but those are only like the really good games. So I'm going to actually keep this just in my games folder. And I'll be calling this what did I say? Block Breaker. So I'm calling this Block Breaker. Once you've typed the name, you can click Save. And here we go. So this is your GameMaker Studio 2 user interface. It's let me just quickly go over what everything does. So at the top here, you've got your main buttons that you sometimes use. Use it for things like testing and saving and loading, and also creating an executable of the game. So we got the home screen, you don't have to go there. You've got a new project, also don't have to go there. Open project, usually don't have to go there either. Save project. This one's extremely important. Click it every 5 minutes, please, because, or whenever you make a change to your project, when you create something new, when you draw something new, click the save project button because I hate it when people lose their things due to like a system freeze or crash or something like that. We've got the create executable button. This is only used when you're kind of like finished your project and ready to turn it into a little program that you can give to your friends. And they won't need GameMaker to run it. It runs on its own. I am not 100% positive if the creator edition of GameMaker Studio lets you do this. If it doesn't, just ask me and I can give you guys one of the student logins, and you can use that to create the executable. Then we've got debug mode. We will be going into that much later on, not in this tutorial series though. We've got the play button. When you press this, it runs the game and you get to see what you've done so far. Stop button, this stops the game. So if you're running the game and it freezes or something, you can click the stop button, or you can also click the X in the corner, which we'll see later on. Clean resources. So this one is for when you're switching between platforms. It's a good idea to, platforms I mean like Android, iOS, and so on, web development and so on. Sometimes resources get stored and managed differently, so clicking clean will reset them to that platform. And also they'll get recreated next time you try and run the game. You've got game options, help, and some zooming features, and then of course the collapse. Collapse makes the sidebars hide. So that's at the top. On the right hand side, this is where most of our assets and tools will be located. We can actually just jump right into setting up our project. So I said that in this lesson, we won't be actually creating anything, but we will be getting the assets ready to go. So let's start with sprites. I'm going to right click on sprites. I'm going to go to create. So this is my mouse. I'm right clicking with my mouse, create, go all the way down to sprite. And here we go. So you've got a window where we can create a sprite. So I want to name my sprites. The naming convention that I use is usually a lowercase letter to represent what it is. So S stands for sprites, and then a capital letter to, which is the name of the object. So this one could be, for example, wall. So S wall. Notice that I just called it wall, not walls. Usually you create things in singular and then you use many of them. Yeah, so that's good. So I've got my S wall. You can see that it showed up in my resources. It's an empty sprite. It's nothing so far, but it is there. It's got a name. I'm going to repeat this step a few times. So once again, right click, create sprite. This one's going to be my S paddle. Once again, lowercase s, capital P. And just keep doing this until you've got all of them. So next one is, this one will be the ball. And then we just need one more, which is our brick. There we go. So we've got all these sprites done. We can do the same thing for objects too. So we can go up to object, create, and object. For objects, the prefix is an O, represents objects, and same thing. So we've got our object ball, and this is a cool thing. I can actually go ahead and show you guys this next step. In your sprites, every object can be represented by a sprite, or it can switch its sprites during runtime too. Oops. So what I want to do is click on here, click on sprites, and select ball. So this is object ball. It has S ball as its sprite. I'm just going to repeat the same process again. So next one is object wall. Select the sprite. Set it to have the wall sprite. Next one will be my object paddle. And so on. All I'm doing is assigning the sprites to the objects. Even though the sprites don't exist yet and the objects don't really exist yet either, they're kind of like placeholders. I can do this assignment already. But you don't have to do this assignment now. You could assign the sprites to the objects later on when we actually do some coding. And then this last one will be, so ball, wall, paddle, need brick. I'm actually going to name it block because my game is called Block Breaker. So you go to sprites, and I do have a sprite called S brick, and this is called an O block. So does that matter? It actually doesn't matter. You can have different names, different sprites connect to different objects. I will go back and change this though. So I'm going to my sprites now, finding my sprite brick, right clicking and clicking on rename, or you can press F2 to do the same thing. I'm going to rename it to S block. And this is the cool thing. I'm not sure if anybody noticed, but as soon as I renamed this to S block, it got renamed here too. So note that when you do assignments, like when you assign sprites to an object, it's actually assigning by a secret number reference, which we don't have access to. So it's not assigning by name. It's assigning in a different way. So if you ever go and change the name of these, it will get updated everywhere else where they get used. Same as objects. And sounds and everything else. So just keep that in mind. And there's one more object which I'm going to make, which is our game controller. So O game. Now this one's a two-worded object, so it has two words in its name. So I'm going to capitalize both of those words. So I capitalized the G in game and the C in controller. And this one does not have a sprite. So some objects, like the invisible objects like the game controller, do not have a sprite. Okay, so that is all done. I've got my objects, I've got my sprites. I do want to go also to sounds. Where's my sounds? So here's my sounds folder. And I'm going to create a sound. And for for sound, the abbreviation I use is SND, or that's the prefix. And then we're going to call this one bounce. So whenever the ball hits something, it's going to play this sound. Okay, so that's it. I've got all my resources ready to go. You'll notice there is a folder called rooms. That one does come with a pre-existing room. The first thing I want to do is actually rename this. So I'm going to right click, rename, and I'm going to do lowercase r, and then level 1, for example. Let's call it level 1. So that's my room 1. And next I'm going to double click it. This opens your room editor. So this would be a place where you throw all the objects together to create the game. We don't really have any objects yet, or we have the objects placeholders, but we don't have any sprites or anything assigned to them, so it's kind of hard to place them. The reason I double click this room is I do want to set up the parameters and the settings for the room before we start any coding. So first thing I noticed, this room is way too wide and kind of too tall for my game. So in the bottom left hand corner, you can set the room settings. I'm going to change the width to be 800 and the height to be 600. Okay, so this already made my room way smaller. So that's my first step. And then because this is a physics-based game, where we use the built-in physics of GameMaker, we do need to enable the physics system. So there's a little arrow at the very bottom here called room physics. Expand that, and then you have to click enable physics. And here you've got your gravity going in the horizontal direction, vertical direction. I don't actually want gravity. So this is a game where there is no gravity. In this game, gravity doesn't exist. So I'm going to change my gravity from 10. And the gravity Y, that's the vertical gravity, changing it from 10 to 0. All right, so that is, my room is set up. My objects are set up, my sprites are set up. At this point, the game is ready to go. Or it's not ready to go, but it's ready we're ready to start coding and editing. Okay, so at this point, please save. And I will see you in the next video.